Hi there, and welcome to Ian's ngauge channel. I'm Ian. Back in my May New Arrivals video, I revealed that I'd purchased a Hornby HM7000 sound decoder. I wouldn't normally have considered purchasing a Hornby decoder, but as it was being sold for such a ridiculously low price by Rails of Sheffield, of course, it just jumped into my shopping basket. The aim was obviously to eventually fit the decoder into one of my ngauge models, but in this video I'm going to take an in-depth look at the decoder and the mobile app that's used to configure it. So let's kick things off by taking a look at the technology that's been packed into the decoder. The HM7000 decoder is available with a number of different interfaces. But for the ngauge modeler, Next18 is the only real viable option to stand a chance of fitting the decoder into a loco. You can see the model I'm working with on screen now. I wasn't expecting it, but the version I picked up also has a speaker in the box, along with several speaker enclosure designs attached to a plastic sprue. The advice is to use the largest speaker enclosure as possible that will fit into your loco. The decoder has a Bluetooth interface which you connect to via the Hornby HM DCC app. The app allows you to control the loco, transfer sounds and modify CV values, but we'll get into that in more detail a little later on. The decoder is NMRA compliant, so it can also be used as a standard DCC decoder, although you'll need the app to load sounds onto it. It's a big decoder though, and even though it adheres to the NMRA interface standards for a Next18 decoder, it doesn't comply with the size requirements, meaning it won't fit into all locos equipped with a Next18 socket, and that applies to some double low scale locos too. I'm not completely sure how I'm going to get it to fit into an ngauge loco, but rest assured I'll try my best. In the meantime, I'm going to test the decoder using my ESU Decoder Tester, so let's set that up next. I'm going to use the ESU Decoder Tester to put the HM7000 through its paces. So the first thing to do is connect the decoder to the Next18 socket of the tester, and I immediately run into a problem. I couldn't see any markings on the HM7000 to determine which way round it went into the socket, so I went with a similar orientation to other Next18 decoders I've tested. However, the next problem was one I was already expecting. The decoder is actually too wide to fit into the socket. This means I have to remove one of the feet from the decoder tester so that the decoder can fit into the Next18 socket. Once the decoder is finally located into the socket, I can try some initial tests. As the HM7000 can be used as a normal DCC decoder, I can try operating it using my NCE power cab. Like all decoders, the default decoder address is 3. And as you can see, I can turn the lights on and off. And when I apply power, the motor begins to spin. Changing direction also works. Obviously, the main selling point of this decoder is that it's a sound decoder. But before we can hear sounds, we need to upload them to the decoder. And we can do that, amongst other things, by using the Hornby HM DCC app. So let's get that installed next. In order to configure the decoder, we need to install the Hornby HM DCC app on a smartphone or tablet. This is available for both Apple and Android devices from their respective app stores. I'm using an old Apple iPad, so install the app from the Apple App Store. Once installed, you need to log into the app using your Hornby login credentials. So if you haven't got a Hornby account, you'll need to register for one on the Hornby website. Once the app is installed, it allows you to configure the decoder and control it using Bluetooth. But before that can happen, we need to link the decoder to the app, and that's what we'll do next. Before the decoder can be controlled or configured using Bluetooth, it needs to be linked to the app. This is done using the Link Device button, which will cause the app to scan for new devices. In my case, it's found the decoder that's still powered on in the Decoder Tester, and has listed it in the Ready to Link section. Selecting the decoder will cause it to be linked with the app. Next, before we can continue, we need to ensure that the decoder firmware is up to date by selecting the Start Update button. This took a short while to complete, after which the Done button can be selected. Next, the app notified me that a new locomotive profile had been detected and asked if I wanted to import the latest locomotive profile function map. I had no idea what this meant, and while I was deciding what to do, the prompt simply disappeared, and I was taken to the locomotive settings screen. I pressed on and decided to call my loco Class 50, as this is where the decoder will probably end up being installed. I then went to the control screen and changed the speed and direction of the loco. But nothing happened. Maybe the function map setting I had not had time to act on was quite important. I navigated back to the locomotive settings screen and found an Import Function Map button, which I selected. This then showed my decoder with an import button, which I pressed. After confirming my actions, the existing locomotive functions from the decoder were imported into the app, and I could see them in the Functions tab of the locomotive settings screen. Going back to the control screen, the functions now appeared there too, and I could now control lights and speed functions using the app over Bluetooth. So now that we had control of the decoder using the app, how did we get sounds onto it? To assign sounds to the decoder, we must select the required sound profile from the list that Hornby provide. We can do this from the locomotive settings screen by scrolling down until we see the Browse Profiles button, then select it. A sound profile screen will now be shown that lists all of the different locomotive profiles divided into categories such as steam, diesel and electric. I am looking for a Class 50 profile, so I scroll through the diesel section. Once found, I select the Class 50 and am taken to a Manage Profile screen that allows me to select and install Locomotive Profile button. Selecting this button initiates the installation process and updates the decoder with the selected locomotive profile. It should be noted that this is quite a lengthy process, and in my case took around 25 minutes. I hadn't been expecting the transfer to take this long, so thought there must be some pretty good quality audio being transferred. Once installed, I was asked if I wanted to import the latest locomotive profile function map, and this time I jumped on the Yes button before the message disappeared. The final part of the installation was to power cycle or reboot the decoder by disconnecting it from power. The app recommends removing your loco from the track, but in my case I simply disconnected the decoder tester from the NCA power cab. To complete the installation, I powered the decoder back on and headed over to the control screen again to see what had changed. Before restoring power to the decoder, I plugged the supplied speaker into the decoder. As I found out, the plug will only go into the socket one way round. Once power is restored to the decoder, heading to the control screen in the app will now show all of the functions that have been installed onto the decoder. Starting the engine seems like a good first test, and as you can see, the lights are already on. I was incredibly pleased when I heard the decoder burst into song. And who can resist the horns of a newly sound profiled decoder? Oh, and keep an eye out for the speaker jumping around. As well as testing sounds, I also run the motor up and down and change direction. Controlling the sounds using Bluetooth was incredibly easy, and having visual references next to each sound function was really helpful. But, could you access the sounds using a DCC command station? Well, yes, of course you could, so let's try doing that next. To use the decoder using a DCC command station, you first have to tell the app that that's how you're going to control it. You do this from the locomotive settings screen in the app, under the control mode section, and select DCC. If you now go to the control screen and try to control the decoder, it will prevent you and warn you that DCC mode is enabled. So we can now control the decoder using the NCA power cab again. Here you see me turning the sounds on and going through a selection of sound functions as well as operating the motor and lights. Okay, so that's all gone quite well, but what if my loco already has a speaker fitted to it? Do I have to use the one that Hornby supplies? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, so let's provide an answer. While the HM7000 decoder already comes supplied with a speaker, should you have a loco already fitted with a speaker, it can also be utilised. Here you'll see that I've removed the speaker that was directly attached to the decoder and have switched the internal decoder tester speaker from off to 8 ohms. I can now use either Bluetooth or DCC commands to play sounds through this speaker. So yes, the HM7000 can utilise a speaker that's already fitted to a loco, presumably as long as it's 8 ohms. The Hornby HM DCC app is far too extensive to provide a full rundown of all of its features here, but I'll touch on a few key areas that I think are important, or useful, or even both. We've been looking at the main settings screen just to give you an idea of how feature-packed the app is. However, you're probably going to spend most of your time in the control screen, especially if you're aiming to control your locos via Bluetooth. The control screen is where you'll find the driving and function controls for your selected loco. Here the screen is showing that I've got the class 50 selected, that its DCC address is 3, and the physical decoder it's linked to. As demonstrated earlier, the loco speed can be changed and functions can be activated from any of the 3 pages provided. Probably the most useful area in the app is the loco settings screen. Here we can edit the decoder setup, change the loco address or loco name, or select the control mode. We can set up vehicle characteristics such as acceleration rates and set the volume of the decoder fitted to the loco too. This is where we also import and export function maps and select a profile for our locomotive. By changing to the data page, we can see what functions are currently assigned to the decoder and what function numbers they are associated with when using the decoder on DCC. Probably one of the most useful features of the app has to be its ability to read and write configuration variables, which are more commonly known as CV values. These are basically used to define how the decoder will operate. On the Advanced CV Editor page, you can read all of the current CV values assigned on the decoder. Each value is annotated using its name, so you don't have to remember its associated ID. The app will then allow you to modify the CV values and write them back to the decoder. This is really an advanced feature and should only be used by those who know what they're doing, but in my opinion, it's a fantastic addition to the software. Okay, let's wrap this up. I really like the idea of the Hornby HM7000. Being able to upload sound files and change CV values from the app using Bluetooth is such a simple and convenient way of configuring the decoder. While Bluetooth can also be used to operate the loco, I much prefer to use my usual DCC throttle, so it's excellent that Hornby has made this possible, allowing control via either Bluetooth or DCC. As well as the app providing decoder configuration and loco operation, it's also a place to get firmware updates for the decoder. This brings an aspect of future-proofing to the decoder, as bugs can be fixed and functionality can be improved. New app updates also bring with them bug fixes and new functionality, but more importantly, new sound profiles can be added via these updates. On the downside, you'll need a smartphone or tablet to use the app, and you need to log in using your Hornby login credentials, and I know that will be a problem for some. The biggest problem though is that the decoder is a non-standard size and won't fit into all ngauge models, nor OO models, or my decoder tester for that matter. However, if it will fit, the HM7000 is a great entry point into DCC sound for those with compatible Next18 equipped models. I'd be really interested to know if you've used one of these decoders in an ngauge loco, and if you have, what loco did you fit it to? Do you use Bluetooth to drive the loco, or do you use a more conventional DCC throttle once the decoder has been configured? And if you use Bluetooth, have you found the connection to be reliable? I'll leave you with one final thought, which is, given the incredibly low price of this HM7000 decoder and speaker, why are other sound decoders so expensive? Because apparently they don't need to be. Let me know your thoughts. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update soon. Bye.